My mirrorless system consists of Olympus Pen cameras. Now, for anyone who's not aware of the differences, Olympus has basically now two ranges of Micro Four Thirds cameras. One is the Pen series, which are, here are a couple of examples right here. They do not have a built-in electronic viewfinder. The OMD series does. If you have a Pen series camera and you want an electronic viewfinder, you have to purchase it as an accessory, like so. This is a very good accessory to have, however, if you are planning on working with legacy lenses. Using the screen on the back of the camera to focus and compose when you are dealing with manual focus can be a little bit tricky, especially in bright outside light. So I would heartily recommend, if you have a mirrorless camera that does not have an electronic viewfinder, please check and see if there is one available. Some of them can be quite pricey. This, for instance, is the least costly and therefore lowest resolution of the models offered by Olympus. This particular one is called a VF3. There is a VF2, which is a little older but higher resolution. And of course the best model right now is the VF4, which was introduced with this camera right here. This was the second of the EP series. This is the EP2, the first one to offer an electronic viewfinder. And this is the current, though I believe soon to be replaced, EP5, which was the most recent in that series. Well, the point out about that's not supposed to be today's discussion, but the point I'd like to make is that I normally carry with me this small bag, which was purchased actually as a book bag from Chapters. In it is an insert from a Gola bag, which was a very uncomfortable bag but had a nice insert. And in it I normally carry a 40 to 150 zoom. That is equivalent to 80 to 300 on a full frame DSLR or a film camera. I carry this 30 millimeter Sigma. This is a 30 millimeter f2.8, which means it is equivalent to a 60 millimeter focal length on full frame. This neat little body cap lens is, this particular one is the 9 millimeter fisheye. It is a fixed f8 lens. That means that the aperture has no adjustment at all. You cannot stop down the aperture, in other words, make it smaller. Neither can you make it any larger than f8. The nice thing about this is that being an f8 lens with a very short focal length, pretty much everything's in focus anyway. So you simply click to the focus point, and there you go. If you want to go in close, you can actually adjust the focus with this lever. And when you push it all the way over, closes the lens. It's now a body cap. Here's an even smaller one. This is the 15 millimeter body cap lens, and I actually use this for shooting some of my videos. The simple reason being that since it is a fixed focus, and since it has a tremendous amount of depth of field, when I shoot video with this, I'm not worried about an autofocus issue or about losing focus because of the wider apertures. It does require a lot of light though. Anyhow, these items here, plus this flash, since the EP2 does not have a built-in flash, this flash unit, are kept in this little bag and used on a day-to-day basis. This, my EP5, has a 19 millimeter f2.8 Sigma attached right now. This lens will be my lens for traveling, and this camera will be the camera I will be using. It's a higher resolution camera than this one, newer technology, lots more newer features, but as I said, I'm not here to talk about these cameras. This is not going to be about brands and so on. Instead, let's get on to the topic at hand, involving this little device right here. You may have noticed that, well, the cameras and lenses seem to have changed on this table right now. So let's start off with how to adapt these legacy lenses. And by legacy lenses, you'll notice right here, a very old 28mm f2.8 Ricoh lens. This is an XR Reconon, which was their top models back in the 1980s when Ricoh was building their own SLRs. Nowadays they own and therefore have construction of the Pentax line of cameras. Anyhow, this has a Pentax K-Mount. The K-Mount has been used by Pentax in various configurations since the mid-1970s. As a result, there are a lot of manual focus lenses and autofocus lenses available in that K-Mount. The older models have an aperture ring, which allows you to adjust the aperture. The newer models, of course, with autofocus usually do not. That is a feature that has been dropped since now, of course, the camera body adjusts the aperture. Well, let's take a look at how this works. First of all, this adapter has, of course, at the back here, a mount for Micro Four Thirds, this camera. At the front, it has a mount for Pentax K, this lens. It also has an adjustment that allows me to open and close the aperture of the lens. Because remember, we don't have an aperture ring on some of these. And as a result, trying to set the aperture can prove a little difficult, well, actually impossible. You would end up with the lens wide open all the time. And that, of course, is not the optimum way of working with photography. Now, to show you how that works, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set my lens at f16. Now, I think you can see through the lens at me right now. I'm hoping you can. This lever here allows me to stop down the lens to that actual f16. So, if I do this, hopefully you can see the lens stopping there. So what do I have now? Now I have a 28mm f2.8 lens for Micro Four Thirds. So, how's this going to work on the camera body? Well, obviously there are a number of things that are no longer going to function. For one thing, these electronic contacts that you see around the lens mount, there are absolutely no electronic contacts here. So when I mount the lens, basically now the camera has no idea what's attached to it. None at all. When I turn the camera on, one of the first things I've got to do, since this has in-body stabilization, one of the first things I'm going to have to do right now is actually go to that in-body stabilization and tell the camera what focal length lens I'm using. Now I'm using a 28mm, so I need to adjust that now. Let's see. I need to adjust that to 28mm. I am going to have to redo this part because I keep making mistakes. Okay. Alright, so the first thing I have to do, since this camera has in-body stabilization, is tell it what lens is attached. Remember, no electrical contacts, it has no way of knowing that. It gets its information from the lens mount. Right now this lens mount is a dumb mount. It doesn't pass on any information at all. So what I have to do is to go to the image stabilization feature, and I have to push a button that will allow me to change this number to the appropriate 28mm. Now the camera knows I have a 28mm lens attached. I have put the camera in aperture priority mode, A. A is not for amateur, just as P is not for professional. A is aperture priority. That means that it is going to set the shutter speed for me based on whatever aperture I have set. Now I can preset the aperture I want. I can focus my lens until I get a nice sharp focus. I can then stop the lens down with that lever and take a picture. I can decide whether my picture is light enough or dark enough. I can open it up all the way to f2.8. Go through the same steps. Now, I do have one neat feature. I can, with a touch of a button back here, I can enlarge the center of the screen in order to focus. And there we go. Okay, first of all, I'd like to point out, as I mentioned already, that this is basically just a hollow piece of equipment with a Micro Four Thirds mount on this side and a Pentax K-Mount on this side. And a little lever in here, which you may or may not be able to see in this light, actually controls the aperture. So that's the adapter. Not much to it. Mounting the adapter on the camera is simply a case of lining up the dots, snapping it in place just as if it were a regular lens. But as you can see by the reflection, that is the sensor in there, so there is no lens. Next step, we get a lens. Now in this case, I'm going to use something a little more substantial. Right here I have a Reconon XR Reconon 135 f2.8. Rather substantial, rather sizable on such a small camera body, but not too unwieldy. Alright, in the next scene what I'm going to show you is how we go about setting the camera and taking the picture. Okay, let's turn on our camera and get ready for shooting. First of all, remember I've got a 135mm lens on here. So when I turn my camera on, right now my camera has no way of telling what lens is attached. Since the camera has in-body stabilization, it needs to know the focal length in order for that stabilization to work. So the first thing I have to do is go to the IS, which is right there, and right here is a little number. Right now it's 28mm. Oops. So I need to increase that value. So I push my exposure compensation button and use this dial to run through the numbers until I see 135. And then I push OK. Now the lens and the camera body know enough about each other to get along. However, how am I going to focus? Well, let's try a simple little focus issue. That's a plate on the far wall. As you can see now, it is very out of focus. Okay, now, in order to have a focus aid, I have set this camera so, as I cycle through here, I will hit a mode where there will be a little green box. See the little green box? Now, if I hit OK, that is the area inside of that little green box magnified. I can now turn my focus until I see proper detail. And there we have it. It is now in focus. If I push that button again, it goes back to the normal view. And if I push this button, it takes the picture. So, there I have it. There is my picture. And if I enlarge that picture, you'll see that I have a nicely focused picture of that plate on the far wall. And that is how we use those legacy lenses. Now obviously it's very easy to do this on a tripod like this, but if you were hand holding your camera, this would be jiggling around a lot. Okay? If I just pick it up for a moment, as you can see, not going to be easy to hold. That is where this comes into play. This is the electronic viewfinder. When I attach this electronic viewfinder and turn my camera on, okay, you notice I still have the normal view. However, if I look up a bit here, if I push this button, notice that now there's a little light in here. Now we're using that electronic viewfinder. Now we can hold the camera much steadier because we're holding it up to our face as we would an SLR, and we can manually focus these lenses much, much easier. One more point. As you can see, this is a rather bulky package, but still quite manageable. It works much better, of course, with the smaller lenses. If I take the 135 off and put the 28 back on, you'll notice that now I have a far more reasonable package. If, however, you get a little carried away, and if you decide that, well, you really do have to bring out that 70 to 200 f2.8 in all of its glory, and you decide that, well, that needs to be mounted on my Micro Four Thirds camera, well, what you end up with is a rather ungainly beast, to say the least. Now, in its defense, I will say one thing. Since there is a tripod mount on this lens, when it is on a tripod, this is actually a very reasonable package. And of course the tripod mount will allow the lens to rotate, which means the body will rotate for horizontal or vertical. But handheld, to say it's a little bit awkward is an understatement. So it will work, and it will probably take fantastic pictures, and if you have it on a tripod, it will be truly incredible. However, I don't really recommend it for hand holding. You're talking about things that are, well, just maybe a little out of the range of each other. Anyhow, from all of this, all you really need to get out of this is that if you have a mirrorless camera, now whether it's a smaller sensor camera like this Micro Four Thirds, which has a crop factor of 2, which makes this lens a 140 to 400 millimeter lens, or something with an even smaller crop factor like a Nikon J1 series camera. The Nikon 1 series has a 2.7 crop factor, so you get basically the lenses become much longer. Or you can go all the way up, of course, to the A7, the Alpha 7 series from Sony, which is a full frame sensor and will give you the exact same field of view that you would get with a 35mm camera or a full frame DSLR. Anyhow, I hope that you have gotten something useful from this little talk. As you can see, I have a lot of gear to pack away. I realize that in some ways these early videos may be, well, somewhat lacking in production value. However, I'm hoping that the information that you're getting from them will make up for any minor issues due to the fact that I'm still on the steep side of the learning curve for video. Anyhow, thank you, and I will see you again soon. Bye.